I definitely, I think, have a very specific meaning or specific meanings, plural, of engagement. And I think one of the big challenges for our field is people don't realize that there are multiple meanings. So there is a set of people who think of engagement in terms of educational engagement, that it means getting people engaged in the material, they're excited by the material, their attitude changes as they interact with the material, as they're engaged in it, they're excited, and so forth. There have been people, especially in the education world, who have really developed that idea of engagement a lot. There's a second kind of engagement, which is democratic engagement. And this is the idea that we have to think about the governance of science. Who decides what counts as an interesting scientific question? Who decides where we allocate resources? This is what I mean by the governance of science. And the question is, who should make those decisions? Is that something that only scientists should make? Or in a democratic society, which many of us believe in, for all of its challenges, democracy still seems like something that many of us believe in, should we have more citizens, more people who are participants in the overall community participate in governance? That's a different meaning of engagement. That's a democratic engagement, a policy engagement. And it doesn't happen independently of some kind of personal, individual educational engagement, but it's thinking about engagement very differently. There is a third way that I found when I was going around one year asking people about engagement, which is institutional engagement. At a practical level, most institutions want people to be engaged with them. So a particular science museum, yes, they want you to learn. Yes, they may articulate that this is all about democracy, but by the way, would you become a member and would you please come back 3 times a year? And that's an institutional engagement that a lot of people who are absolutely committed to the high ideals of the field are also committed to the strength and growth of their own institutions. So I think it's important to think about those 3 different kinds of engagement. They can overlap. The same project can address multiple meanings of engagement, but they are different meanings. So I think there are a couple of important things for people to think about engagement. First off, engagement is not just another word for delivering information, right? That's, some people have said, well, we know the deficit model is no good, so we're doing public engagement. And here, let me do an engagement exercise where we present you with lots of information. That's not the way to think about engagement. I think practitioners can be thinking about, what is my goal? Is my goal individual educational engagement? Is my goal some kind of democratic empowerment? Is my goal a stronger connection with my institution? Each of those is an important and reasonable goal, but it's important to be clear about what your goals are, or if you have multiple goals, what the priorities between them are, and which ones you're willing to trade off for the others. If I think about some examples where I went into doing some observations of people watching pigeons or people going to a music festival where there were science events, we had scales that we were measuring. We were asking people to rate themselves on certain kinds of scales, and yet those didn't capture some of the things that we were observing happening. So we had to be willing to step away from our scales and look and see what's going on that we didn't think to measure, and how can we ask interesting questions. There are also problems with scales because people will, there's well-known problems with survey research of people giving you the socially desirable answer. Which of these topics are you interested in? Of course I'm interested in science, but they aren't, especially if you compare it with sports or politics, right? And yet the scale shows that. So you have to be a little careful about how you interpret some of the scales. So while I will certainly go in and use scales, a lot of what my goal is to do is to be not so stuck in the scale that I don't step back and say, what am I not seeing? What's happening here? Well, what's happening here that I didn't think to measure? And what's not happening here?